So my name is Nick Davis. I'm a senior associate at Houseal Lavigne. I'm primarily specialized in visualizations. I'm an urban designer and landscape architect. I help the firm pull together a lot of our graphics, vignettes, document formatting, general storyboarding. So really anything that's graphic is what I try to get my hands on. Okay, so we're gonna pick up leaving off where Devin took the entire downtown for the community, built it in 3D model. So the entire downtown is framed out this way. We're gonna zoom into this specific catalyst site that was identified on the overall plan. Currently it's like a vacant lot, it used to be a gas station. We have a site plan that we developed in Autocad that we're gonna import into SketchUp, make some improvements, add in some textures, add in some of the entourage. We also have a 3D building that we're gonna drop in. And then we're gonna deliver this in two different ways. One is like a contained plan view of it, and then also drop it into the overall 3D model as a separate illustration. So first thing I'll do is open up SketchUp. So some of this is just the initial imports, making sure the information is cleaned up and good enough to work with. So what we do is in AutoCAD, this is how we design. So this is my site in here. When we bring it into SketchUp, just for quick layering, we break it out into pieces. And it's typically broken out into the elements that I'm gonna wanna merge. So like all the base elements are put together, all the pavement elements are put together, the structures, the buildings, site furnishing, and vegetation. And we'll just start removing some of this line work as we go along. So the first thing I'll do is just get rid of, so some of this is just putting them on the right layers. So everything that's inside the group, we put on 0, and then we put the group itself on the layer that it needs to respond to, which is the right-of-way layer, and then just put this to 0. And that'll be important later. And then as I'm making these groups, I'll bring these up. These are known numbers. So like I knew I set this by 2500. This one was, also 2500, and then back to where it's drawn in AutoCAD is 2500. So now if I make any additions in CAD, these are all referenced to one another. It's close to 0, 0. So this isn't geolocated, but it is in a place that's consistent. So I know like if we make any changes, say we decide that we want the parking lot to be different, that'll be easy to just bring it over from the CAD work. So put this all on 0. Put this on, we'll call this base. I'm gonna call this base illustrative. So these are all the different painted lines, so striping, crosswalks, things like that. Put them on stripe. And then these are all the site furnishings, so lights, tree grates. Those, since they're already groups, they're blocks and components, I'm just gonna leave them as they are. They don't need to go to a sub layer. So, okay, oops, one more. Okay, all right, so a little tedious, but dropped in. So this is my new site plan. So I'm gonna start making faces. I'm going to get rid of some of this extra data because it already exists in some of the model work that has already been developed. So I don't necessarily need all this context. It's really about this area. So the other thing I'm gonna do is purge all unused and just double check that I have everything I need. Oops, I need one of those layers. The B poly layer we use as kind of our like no plot. So like the right-of-way will be, the right-of-way and the B poly layers are both kind of no plot layers, but we like to keep them, they're good references. So some of the information that's inside this line work, like what'll be inside our blocks, will go to no plot, but we use them as source and reference. The other piece I'm gonna get, oh, this is one thing, if this ever happens to you, I just do the extents and it gets rid of it. See if the zoom extent, it's just a weird thing. So I'm gonna save this file. And the next step is to bring in the 3D model, HHH. Okay, so now let's import the collada. So we develop our 3D buildings sometimes in a different program, City Engine. It just gives us some options that we can do quickly. So I'm just gonna import it. Sometimes importing it, there's some things that you need to fix with the textures, and let me make sure I grab the right one. So that's the model that it'll bring in. It doesn't really locate it in any specific place. You just have to locate it yourself. So since I don't have to do it in the model, I'll just go grab this building footprint, bring it back. I'm gonna paste to place, and then just bring the model over. Okay, so that's the model. There's some small tweaks that we'll make to the textures. It doesn't handle textures as well, City Engine, as what we want to do for our SketchUp model. So we'll come in and tweak these, but the good thing is everything comes in with separate colors. So like I can select the brick by brick, just like you could in select by texture. So those are all easily changed, but for now we'll just drop this in. We can tweak it later. The other thing I'll do is just get rid of the layer structure. So put everything on 0. So that way everything in here is on 0. Paste in place. All right, we'll put that on our proposed building. So the next step would be to start making some of the faces for the actual model. So what I'm gonna do is set up a couple of working scenes to make this a little easier to start developing the model. So we'll have a drafting scene. It's not camera centric. The style, come on default. And then we'll have like a scene that has everything on, except for the vegetation. Normally keep that off. Don't turn that on until the very end, especially once these get changed into, actually, to the city. I think this angle might be the most beneficial. Something like that. We'll create a new one. So this will be scene 1 color. We'll have some more textures too later, but for now, this will be good. So this will be our drafting. I normally leave like the primary stuff that I know I'm gonna want on in the drafting mode. Okay, so now we can start making some faces. Oh yeah, and then inside the draft, I would make, let's turn on profiles and endpoints, just so we can catch some errors if there are any, which I'm sure there are. Bringing stuff over from CAD into SketchUp sometimes doesn't close the gaps as well, so it's harder to make faces. So I'm gonna turn off everything except for the illustrative base and start making the faces. I'm also gonna decide where I wanna cut this. So I think I wanna cut it somewhere here. Let me see where I took the striping to. So somewhere about right here. And then just make faces. Hopefully everything comes in perfectly. It's pretty close. Just start closing off some of the errors. So some of this context is not very relevant, so we're gonna get rid of it. I really want this to be about the redevelopment site that we're focusing on. Sometimes this is easy. We could have done this in CAD, but I find this is a little bit quicker and visually it's easier to identify what I might want or not want in SketchUp. Certainly after we get like some views picked. So we typically wait until we come into SketchUp to make the clipping decisions. The eraser tool is pretty nice. Okay. Oops. All right, so that's essentially our view. Close off any weird. Okay, so that should be a good start. I'll even apply some colors now. They're very general because stuff's, I know they'll change. Oh, there's some errors. Let's fix those. For whatever reason, this line's not dividing it, and they are coplanar. Everything on this is coplanar. So if you just do a cut and paste in place, sometimes it fixes the error. Do the same thing over here. So it did it again. That's a weird but nice feature that it corrects. So it looks like everything's good. So I'll start applying some colors just so I can make sure I'm on track. So these are the parkways, grass. So one thing I noticed is since this site does kind of come out to here with the property line, we'll drop that in. Let's make this obnoxiously pink. So the reason we apply color early is as we start to extrude, if you don't, it's harder and harder. It just gets harder and harder to start catching up with where you didn't. So like if I extrude this, all those faces are, like I want to select by that material, but since it's the default, it won't. But if I do this and select by material, it'll grab all the sidewalks. So I can quickly change them. So that's part of why we just try to do it as early on as we can. Looks like this one didn't close. That's going to transition into a parkway. So this is the traditional downtown street. This is York Street. This is a bypass street, so it's going to switch into a parkway. But right here where we have a strong multifamily proposed 3 to 4 stories. Okay, so now I'm going to pop up the road or really just push it down. We're not going to put in like curbs and gutter. This view is going to be so pulled back, there's really no value in it. The design itself is set up to allow for it. It would be easy enough to do, but for this, we're gonna drop it down. And actually, since it's doing it that way, let's pull it up since it's gonna be tricky. So copy, so cut. All right, so I'm gonna pull this up, pull it down. And so since that's the block and this is we're working outside the block, I can bring it over without worrying about it getting into the faces. And then just cut, paste it back into place. And then I'm gonna want it to have the curb color, so I'm gonna leave it as it is. Sometimes we would just match it, but I think this will be fine. And then I'll just push all these down, so there's only a couple. So these will be accentuated sidewalks. Typically in our recommendations, we make sure that we call out sidewalks separate from the curbs. Separate from the edge of pavement. Turning on perspective so I can get a better sense of what we're actually able to see. So it may need to be more like this so you can actually see the access drive. And like I said, these buildings were already modeled somewhere else. So we'll bring those in later. And that's even if we want them, but we might just ghost them in just so you have the context of what's going on. I am gonna cut this. And since these are now on 2 different planes, what I normally do is outside the model, I also don't work in 3D mode, so I normally toggle. V is toggle parallel and perspective for me. I find it difficult to work in 3D, just the 3D view. So if I push this up, pull it down, So I'm gonna paste into place and intersect with model. Just get rid of all this. And then I want the pavement to end in the same, or the pavement lines to end in the same place. So I'll just intersect with model, but since they're in different groups, it's a little trickier. Okay. So now what we'll do is just finish off the striping. So let's just make faces. Reverse, apply a color. And again, we'll probably tweak these colors once I see them in the rendered mode. And some of like this stuff where you see the geometry overlapping won't really be relevant. You won't see it once it's in the render mode. Oops, I want to do that. So we should be good. And then we'll raise this up because right now on the, let's go to our draft mode. So turn all those layers. Right now you can kind of, there's a little flicker sometimes since these are all on the same. Oh, actually no, this is down. So the pavement striping is too high. It's 0.5 down. So I'm gonna move it down to 0.5, which is right on the plane with the road. And then we'll raise it like 0.05, just enough where it's up. It'll cast like the slightest shadow, so you don't even have to make it 3D like the paint would be. But it also won't do the flicker if we do animation or in the export. Sometimes the program that we use to render can air out or send like 2 different colors. So now what we'll start doing is bringing in some of the 3D components. So we're gonna work on bringing in the lights, traffic signals, the tree grates. Then we'll start editing some of these textures to make them look a little bit more realistic. And the last step will be bringing in the trees. So we're pretty close. So what I wanna do is go to our Sketchup library. So as a firm, we have a fairly extensive Sketchup library that we use. So it's all of our assets. These are the rendering programs that we'll use. And we'll go over that a little bit more. These are all of our extensions. That shouldn't say old. I mean, it's just every extension ever that we use, I guess, not ever, but the ones that are relevant to us. These are the ones that we pay for. I'm sorry, those are the ones that are free. These are the ones that we pay for. And we'll use them for various different reasons, but typically it's to clean up line work from other drawings or just speed up our workflow. These are our licenses. But so in the SketchUp model library, we've broken it out into what's useful for us. So for example, right now I want to go get some traffic elements. So this should be fairly consistent with what our layering system is in SketchUp. We don't really have a standard so much as it's a guide. We like to keep it simple. Every project's different in scale and type. So as long as it's easy for someone to jump in and kind of know what's going on and be able to assess quickly where stuff's layered and what can be turned on, what can be turned off. We're not dogmatic about it, but I'll go into this. This is just one example of the traffic elements that we might want to drop in, and we just coupled them all, by like. And I'm going to double check what their lighting standard is now. So it's just the typical. Well, I guess they're somewhat modern. I don't know that we have that light standard. Oh, you know what we did, because we actually did the corridor plan up the road for them. So I think this light will work for what they have. Yeah, this will be fine. So we'll use this light and then attach a traffic signal to it. So we'll grab that and this. I know they have a standalone arm, so I'm gonna grab a couple of these, and I know they have a standalone light, and that we may need to generate. They have a new ornamental light that looks something like this. I'll see if we have it in one of our other models. So just bring this in. And so this is the standalone light. These are all components. I can tell because this arm's coming across. That's just a cue for us to know that that's one with the arm. So I'll bring that over. And then, oh, I didn't see a tree grate. We'll have to grab a tree grate. And just for now, for the sake of the look of the model, we'll drop in this other light. So this one's pretty easy. Everything should be on 0 inside the model. We'll just double check it. Yeah, everything's on 0. So I'm gonna go inside this component and just drop this into place. And then like I mentioned before, what I'll do is select the model and then select everything else, so the kind of the reverse. And I'm gonna put all of this line work on this B poly layer. So right now that B poly's off, but what this will do is, since it's all inside my street light, if I turn off the street light, it'll turn off everything. But it also keeps the line work in there so I can see it. And part of that line work is me being able to make sure that I'm far enough away from the curb. They have a standard. Theirs is typically 1.5 feet off. So we could even set like a mini foundation, but for the sake of this, it's not terribly important. But we do leave that line work on, and then when we're going to export it, it'll just be on a hidden layer, so you won't see it. That's also nice because I can just grab this line work that's on the 2D plane as opposed to like grabbing the model sometimes can be a little tricky. Let's grab their Cobra, well, I guess modified Cobra. Now, I gotta visualize that one. So the light's looking that way. These don't have to be 100% what they have, but it's pretty close, just enough where they can see it. So I think they only had 2 lights, so we'll have to get rid of that. So 2, yeah. So let's get rid of this one. I'm gonna cut this into the model. I'm gonna put this on the V poly layer, paste into place. So now that should drop in as it is. So we need to extend it out a little bit. So just in the top view, I will pull this out. So we'll kind of match their lane system. And then just double checking across the street. So a standalone, a standalone, a standalone. So these might just get directly placed over the top because each one of these standalones are a little bit different. So like this one's looking both directions. One of them only has 1. Okay, so that kind of populates some of the details that we're gonna need. Got those, so now let's go back to the library. I don't think there's anything else in here that I would need. Actually, I am gonna take this. Although I don't even know if we'll see it in our export. Let's see if there's, yeah, we'll be able to see it. There, the color thing. So I'm gonna turn it all on. So I'm gonna turn everything on and raise it up. I forgot my ground plane. I'm below the ground plane with the model since I pushed down the pavement, so raise that up. 0.5. So now when I turn this on, it'll be more colorful. Okay, so the next step is to bring in, we have all of our lights. We need to bring in some tree grades. So same thing, I'll just go to our, oh, we can get rid of the Collada file. Library, just make sure there's nothing else I need in here. No. I'm gonna need some streetscape elements. And then the last piece will be like entourage, people, vegetation. So this will be primarily elements that you'll see in the streetscape. I believe this is the one where we have our tree grades. Should be. There's some overlap, so this might have the ornamental light I was looking for. But we do need some of these trees. So let's take this one, this one, this one. So we just use this to kind of sort out all the different types of vegetation that we have in our library, and then you can drop them in as needed by project. We try not to use the same ones over and over. We tweak them once they get dropped into a file. Changing the colors, we'll change the scale of stuff so they don't look repetitive. And then we get those from various sources. We use 3D Warehouse. We'll develop a couple ourselves if there's something really specific that we want. So I wouldn't say that we go to the library all the time. There are times where, you know, we'll go to a past model. Like for instance, on this one, I'm probably going to go to what we did for the corridor plan, which is further up the road, and drop some of those elements in here, just so there's some consistency between their plans. So I'm going to pull these off to this side, and when we are dropping in vegetation, they'll be ready to go. So let's go get some people and cars and start populating the model. Then we'll drop in the trees. So we've done a couple of really photorealistic ones, so we'll use these. We tend to lean more towards, I don't want to say like a cartoony look, but just something that's a little more conceptual, because although we're getting into a lot of detail in the models, we find that a lot of times our clients can be a little apprehensive if it looks like the model's been taken too far, or it's like, yeah, you can build this tomorrow. So we like to, you know, keep it somewhat simple, but we can drop in a lot of these major elements. Oh, transit. We have a different one that has some transit, but get some trucks for some scale, maybe a helicopter. That'd be awesome. We've never actually used that, I don't think. One thing I wanted to point out that we do, and this goes into that B poly layer, is I find it can be really difficult to place cars, people, stuff that don't have like a perfect 2D plane to drop it down on the face, and just getting the snaps tricky. So what we do is I'll end up having, that's a component, this is its own component, and we'll put that on. So right now it's on vehicle box. I'm just gonna take that layer. So where are you at, vehicle box? So I'm going to make B poly the primary layer. I'm gonna delete that box layer and move it to the current layer. So now if I toggle that B poly, which I gotta switch, it'll turn off those planes. But while we're placing the cars, I'm gonna turn off the car. So let's put vehicle, site furnishing. So 03 tree, site furnishing. So 03. So that'll make more sense here in a second, but so like as I'm placing the cars, even the colors correspond too, but as I'm placing the cars, I just turn that off. And I just place these. So it's a little quicker to do. I'm gonna make sure these are all down on the plane. They should be. All right. And then just in top view, start dropping in some cars. So I'll drop in a couple of cars, some trucks, things like that. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. Okay, I think that'll work. So now I'm just gonna tweak some of the textures. So what I'm gonna do is, like I'd mentioned, redone the corridor for this, actually this street. So I'm gonna open that up. So that's another source that we'll use. So we'll use our library, which I was showing you here. So we have like, these are some of the styles that we'll use sometimes when we're exporting. This is our texture library. So there might be a couple of textures that are gonna be unique to this one, but I am gonna use some of the ones that we used before just because it'll make it look consistent since they're all gonna be a part of one kind of vision for this area. But you can see these are ones that we've downloaded that we'll use periodically. But again, it's all on our server, so it's something that all of us can use. And then these are just some of the write-ups that we've done for new people that are starting, make sure they understand our process. It's more tutorials, less like standards or a book that you have to follow. But I'm gonna grab some of those styles. Let's do, and really the only two that I wanna make sure I get are the roadway and the streetscape, or I'm sorry, the roadway and the sidewalks. Those are the two things that I think will look the most similar. And then 0.5, so we'll do like a soldier course on this. I'm actually thinking this might look nicer if it was done the same way, so 0.5, good Lord. Okay, so since we're kind of into this now, let's go into a texture view. So inside my styles, I'll just do texture so I can see these. I think these are okay. This might be a little dark, so I'm gonna edit that color. I might darken this up a little bit. And then let's copy this style. Let's add a texture. So I will go to the library for this. I'm gonna edit, go to the resource library. So that looks a little, maybe a little too cartoony for me. I might dull it a little. But again, I mean, once we run this through the rendering program, oops, snap over. It might look a little bit different. So I'm not gonna spend too much time on messing with the colors until we get it to the final export. but I am gonna tweak these cornices. So just enough where there's enough texture. I'm gonna get rid of this. It looks a little fake. But we do like to add some elements up top, so it looks somewhat more realistic. I had a couple off to the side that I'll just drop in from the original SketchUp. Okay, so let's see how we're looking here. So I think at this point, I start to see how the shadows are working. So I don't want the shadows to be too dominating. I think these will work. That's a good view. Continue editing some of the textures. So we're only doing a different tone for the brick on the ground floor, just so it's clear that there's a break in the ground floor versus the upper floor. That'll help us kind of explain what's going on, where the changes are, how many floors this building really is. And then one thing I was gonna do, just to kind of accentuate the corner, I wanted to see if this looked good. Just have like a run. The awning's a little excessive, so we'll knock that down. Just color-wise, let's make it black for now. Then I noticed the windows are a little too opaque. So we're seeing too much of the inside, so I'm gonna knock that down. Okay, so now let's see what it's gonna look like adding in some of the trees. I think that's the big pieces that remain. Adding in vegetation. So we don't need these, they're outside of the context of the area. So for these, I normally bring the block over. It's similar to what we had done for the streetlights. I'm grabbing the ones that I know are unique. We don't necessarily get into the variety or types of trees so much as what the purpose of the tree is. So some of these are existing, like this one here is a proposed tree that's in the, or on site. So it would be the parking lot landscaping. You know, this one's for the shrubs that are throughout the site. This is an existing evergreen. These are existing trees that are on the perimeter. So we want these trees to kind of stand out a little bit. So what I'll do is, so I want the proposed trees to be a little bit more prominent than the existing. Come on, set. So that tree's a little big. Let's knock it down. So that's good. So same thing, so cut, move all this to the B poly layer. And then paste in place. I'm gonna tweak these colors, make it a little bit duller. Make this a little bit more brown. And again, we might tweak those as they get dropped in. So now you can see these are all dropped in. They'll come in as different sizes based on what the block was driving in the CAD file, but we're gonna tweak them one more set too. Let's get the evergreen in. So I'm gonna drop the rest of these trees in. All right, so there's blue car syndrome. So we have the trees dropped in. I was just checking the shadows to see if they'd be too prominent. I think they'll be okay, but I'm looking around now. I see like this blue car everywhere. So we're gonna remove that. I'm going to go back into draft mode. Okay, and then so the last piece that we want to add are some people. So I'm going to set up a layer to bring in some people, purge all the unused. Just because we've been bringing in a lot of stuff too, I'm going to just purge some of the statistics, just purge some of the unused models. Fixed problems, shouldn't be anything. Say okay. Do a quick save. And since this is a model, we'll grab some 3D people. So I'm just gonna grab some randoms. this is a chance to show how wide the sidewalk is. So I want to get a wide or a larger group of people. You know, maybe this person's walking the other way. I'll also toggle on, once I get them kind of placed on where I think I want them to be, I will toggle on all the stuff that is in the model and make sure that it's actually not going to be blocked or anything like that. So I'm also going to put them kind of focusing in on this area. I don't want to draw too much attention to the periphery, so I'll probably pull these back a little. That way there's kind of a, looks like the activity or the focus is on what we're proposing as opposed to, you know, what already exists or what's around. Okay, cool.